The frontier had a way of swallowing people whole quietly without complaint. And in that wide, rugged land, Mira had learned early how to survive by blending into the silence. She lived alone in a tiny, weathered cabin hidden deep within the forest, a cabin her mother had built long before illness carried her away. Now, at barely 17, Mira kept the place standing with her own 2 hands, patching the roof with pine pitch, gathering herbs for medicine, and cutting firewood until her palms were blistered and raw. Life in the woods was lonely. Yes, but it was also predictable, safe, and free from the judgment of the townsfolk. Mira ventured into town only when absolutely necessary, trading dried herbs or salves for flour and candles. The townspeople treated her with a gentle suspicion, whispering behind her back. Some called her the forest girl, others strange, because she knew the language of plants better than the ways of people. She had learned long ago not to care. The woods were kinder to her than any human had ever been, yet beneath her quiet strength, Mira carried a heavy ache and ache for belonging, for conversation that wasn't spoken to trees, for a world where someone knew her name and cared if she came home at night. But wishes were luxuries she couldn't afford, so she buried them under work, routine, and the thick shield of solitude. As autumn crept across the land, the forest changed with it. The air sharpened, leaves crackled underfoot, and wolves began drifting closer to human homesteads, hungry and bold. Mira knew their calls well. She knew when their howls were warnings, when they were threats, and when they were triumphant. But on this evening, the cry that echoed through the trees was not the cry of wolves. It was something far more desperate. Just as the sun dipped behind the pines, Mira was gathering fallen branches for her fire, stacking them into a crude bundle against her shoulder. The air was still, the forest quiet, until a sudden, frantic shout tore through the fading light. "Help! Somebody please!" A man's voice. Panicked, pained. Mira froze, her heart hammering. Voices were rare out here. Voices in trouble even rarer. She didn't think, she simply moved. Instinct propelled her feet toward the sound, dodging roots, slipping between trees with the grace of someone who had grown up in the woods. The shouts came again, weaker this time, and Mira quickened her pace. Breaking into a small clearing, she saw him, a cowboy sprawled in the dirt, one leg twisted beneath him where his horse had thrown him. His hat lay trampled and muddy a few feet away. Encircling him, low to the ground, eyes glowing in the dim light, were 3 wolves. Mira's breath caught. The cowboy tried swinging his rifle, but pain shot through him, and he dropped it. The wolves crept closer, between snarls and cautious steps. Mira didn't have a weapon, only her small pouch of herbs, her sling, and the pouch of glowing fire embers she kept for emergency kindling. Her hands trembled, but the choice was made the moment she saw him. She grabbed a handful of burning embers, wrapped in a metal tin, and hurled them toward the wolves, shouting with a fierceness she didn't know she possessed. Sparks exploded across the ground. The wolves recoiled, startled, circling back. Mira stepped between the man and the pack small, lone, terrified, but unwavering. In that moment, the life of a cowboy she had never met rested, entirely in her hands, and nothing would ever be the same again. The clearing pulsed with danger shadows shifting, teeth flashing, the low growl of wolves vibrating through the cold air. Mira's heart slammed against her ribs, but she kept her shaking legs planted firmly between the wounded cowboy and the predators stalking him. The wolves, startled by the embers she had thrown, retreated only a few steps. They were hungry, desperate creatures driven by the hardening season and now robbed of an easy kill. They circled wider, testing her resolve. Mira gripped the cold tin tight in her hand, her breath forming clouds in the fading light. She knew the forest rhythm better than anyone, and she knew this wasn't over. Behind her, The cowboy groaned. "Trying to sit up. Stay still," Mira whispered urgently. Not turning her head, even her voice trembled. The wolves paused at the sound, 3 pairs of yellow eyes glowing like lanterns through the mist. Mira reached for the small slingshot strapped to her belt, her hands fumbling with nerves. She loaded a smooth river stone and pulled back the band as far as her fingers allowed. A wolf lunged forward, snapping its jaws. Mira released. The stone struck the ground inches from its paws, causing a sharp crack that echoed through the clearing. The pack jerked back. Mira grabbed another ember from the tin and tossed it, sending sparks dancing through the air. Wolves hated fire. It was her only advantage. Finally, with a mix of defiance and frustration, the animal slinked back into the deeper woods, melting into shadow. The clearing fell silent except for Myra's rapid breathing. Only once she was sure they were gone did her knees nearly buckle. The cowboy coughed, wincing in pain. Mira rushed to him, her bravado collapsing into raw concern. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him. He gave a weak laugh. "Figured that out when the big one tried making dinner of me." Despite her worry, Mira felt a nervous smile tug at her lips. The man's voice was deep, warm, touched with humor even now. But when she examined his leg, her expression tightened. His ankle was badly twisted, possibly broken, and claw marks striped his coat. "You can't walk," Myra said softly. "And we can't stay here." The cowboy nodded grimly. "Name's Caleb," he rasped, struggling to keep his focus. "Reckon I owe you my life." Mira shook her head. "Save your strength." She tore a strip from her own cloak, pressed herbs onto his wounds, and wrapped them tightly. Caleb hissed at the sting but didn't protest. Once she stabilized his leg as best she could, she slipped her shoulder under his arm. "We need to get out before they come back," she murmured, doubt her frame was small. But determination burned stronger than fear. Slowly, painfully, she helped Caleb rise. Each step was a battle. Caleb leaned heavily on her, trying not to crush her under his weight, but she only gripped him tighter. The walk felt endless. Branches scraped their clothes, roots snagged their feet. Twice, Caleb stumbled, groaning, and Mira braced him with all her strength. "Almost there," she whispered each time. Even though she didn't know if she was reassuring him or herself. At last, the soft glow of Myra's hidden cabin appeared between the trees. Relief washed over her like warm water. Inside, she guided Caleb to the small cot near the fire. As she tended to him, washing blood, preparing salves, wrapping wounds, Caleb watched her with quiet awe. "You're something else," he murmured. "No one's ever fought wolves for me before." Mira felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away. Compliments were foreign to her. Kindness was unfamiliar. She didn't know that this moment, this night, would stitch their lives together in ways she never imagined. She only knew that she had saved a stranger, and tomorrow she planned to send him back to his world. Before he could step into hers. Caleb woke the next morning surrounded by the soft glow of dawn, the scent of pine resin, and a heat he didn't recognize until he remembered the girl, the one who chased off a wolf pack with nothing but fire and courage, the one who dragged him, half-conscious, through the forest, the one who sat at his bedside through the night, keeping the fire alive so he wouldn't slip into the cold again. But when he opened his eyes fully, the room was empty. The cabin was small, but tidy bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters. A wooden table held jars of poultices, and the fire crackled low in the hearth. It felt like a space built by someone who had no one else to depend on, yet still cared enough to create warmth in the world. Caleb shifted. Wincing as pain shot through his leg, he tried calling out, "Miss? Forest girl? Hello?" No answer. He lay still, listening to the quiet of the woods outside. Whoever she was, she had saved his life and then vanished again like mist, but she had left water on the table, fresh bandages, and food warming near the fire, she had cared enough to heal him, yet not enough to want to be seen in the morning light. Or perhaps, Caleb thought, she was simply a girl used to disappearing before she could be hurt later. Mira returned with her arms full of pine branches. Startled to find Caleb awake, she hesitated in the doorway, half hidden behind a curtain of hair. As though unsure whether she should step inside, "You're awake," she murmured. Her voice was soft. More startled than relieved, Caleb gave her a half smile. "Could be dead. But I reckon you wouldn't let that happen." Mira looked away. Embarrassed, she moved around the cabin quickly, almost nervously adding wood to the fire, checking the pot. Refreshing the herbs near his cot, she didn't speak unless he asked her something directly, and even then her answers were short. Cautious Caleb sensed her wariness, but he wasn't offended, if anything. He was intrigued. Who was this girl who fought wolves like lightning yet spoke as though she expected to be interrupted at any moment? Over the next 2 days, Mira tended his wounds with surprising skill. She cooled his fever with damp cloths, ground herbs that eased his pain, and kept a gentle but careful distance between them whenever Caleb asked questions her age. Why she lived alone. If she had family, she stiffened, her answers became vague. Or she would suddenly find a reason to step outside by the time his leg was well enough for him to hobble. Caleb knew better than to pry, but he also knew something else. He needed to see her again when he finally rode home on a borrowed crutch and the half-wild Mara had caught for him. Caleb carried more than just his healing wounds. He carried an ache in his chest he didn't fully understand. Back at his ranch, his men nearly dropped their tools at the sight of him. Battered and limping, they demanded answers, fussed over him. Cursed wolves and wild horses, but Caleb barely listened. He couldn't stop thinking about Mira, her quick hands, her shy eyes, her bravery that outshone any ranch hand he knew. When he described her to people in town, most only shook their heads. "Oh, that forest girl? She keeps to herself. Strange little thing, ain't she?" Caleb disagreed fiercely. She wasn't strange. She was extraordinary. And one quiet afternoon, when the pain in his leg had dulled and the sky was clear, he saddled his horse. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Didn't need to. He rode toward the deep woods. He was going to find her, not out of debt, but because something inside him refused to let her remain a fading memory. She had saved his life. Now he was determined to know the life she was hiding. Caleb found Mira's cabin on a cool morning. Guided more by intuition than by trail, he remembered the scent of pine, the sound of a nearby creek, the way the sunlight filtered through heavy branches. But when he approached, he stopped short, not wanting to frighten her. Instead, he simply sat on a fallen log outside her door and waited. Mira spotted him before she heard him. She had been gathering herbs in the clearing when she noticed a familiar cowboy hat resting against a boot. Caleb, sitting stiffly but patiently, hands resting loosely on his knees, she froze. Why had he come back? Why seek the company of a girl who every other soul preferred to avoid? She almost slipped back into the forest to disappear, but something tugged at her curiosity. Confusion, maybe even longing. So she stepped into the clearing, clutching her basket against her chest as if it were a shield. "You shouldn't be walking," she said quietly. Caleb looked up, relief lighting his features, as though he'd waited a long time to see her again and miss a chance to thank the girl who saved my hide. Not likely. Mira dropped her gaze, uncertain what to do with such kindness. She invited him inside only after he insisted his leg needed a rest. And even then, she kept a cautious distance. The early visits were awkward. Caleb tried to make conversation. Mira answered with nods or short, clipped replies. She was polite but guarded, her eyes constantly flicking to the door as though expecting him to leave. But Caleb wasn't easily discouraged. He came with small offerings, not gifts, but excuses that felt less threatening to Mira. One day he brought a broken saddle strap and asked If she had strong glue another day, he brought herbs from his ranch and asked if she knew their uses. Another day he brought an apple pie from his cook and claimed he couldn't finish it. Alone, each visit chipped away at her fear. One afternoon, after weeks of quiet persistence, Mira finally asked, "Why do you keep coming here?" Caleb leaned back in the wooden chair she had repaired herself. "Because you're someone worth knowing." No one had ever said that to her before. For a moment, Mira couldn't breathe. From then on, things shifted slowly. Delicately, Mira began to open her world in small bits. She showed Caleb where she gathered winter mint, how she made healing salves, how she read the weather by the way the birds flew. Caleb, in turn, told stories of ranch life, of rowdy cattle, stubborn horses, and a sky that stretched endlessly over the prairie. He made her laugh, truly laugh. For the first time in years, their friendship grew like the gentle flame of a sheltered candle, warmed by shared silences and quiet gestures. Caleb fixed the squeaky hinge on her door. Mira mended his torn riding gloves. He taught her how to ride a steady old gelding named Jasper. She brewed tea to ease the ache in his healing leg. Still, Mira struggled with doubt. She had lived too long unseen, unwanted. She feared letting herself hope for more. "What do you want from me?" she asked one evening, unable to hide her trembling. Caleb's answer came without hesitation. "Nothing you don't want to give." The tenderness in his eyes frightened her more than wolves ever could, but it also warmed a part of her heart she had closed long ago. They were two lonely souls, one hiding from the world, the other searching for something he didn't know he needed, slowly unraveling each other's walls. And, though neither said it aloud, their lives were already weaving into a single, fragile bond, a bond that would soon be tested in ways neither expected. The forest had always been Mira's sanctuary, a place where every rustling leaf and snapping twig was familiar, predictable, and under her control. Yet, on a chill autumn evening, that sanctuary transformed into a place of imminent danger. Once more wolves had returned, hungrier and bolder than before, their glowing eyes tracking the faint scent of Myra's cabin. She spotted them first, just beyond the tree line, their low growls vibrating through the forest floor. Panic surged through her chest, but it was no longer paralyzing fear. It was resolve this time. She would not face the threat alone. She raced back to her cabin, breath ragged, heart hammering. The fire she had built earlier for warmth now became a symbol of urgency. She grabbed a lantern, thinking of Caleb, of the man who had become more than a rescuer in her life. Though she had yet to say it aloud, he was somewhere near the edge of her forest, likely helping on the ranch, unaware of the approaching danger. And yet, something deep inside her told her that this threat was bigger than either of them alone. By the time the wolves neared, the sound of galloping hooves announced Caleb's arrival. He appeared almost like a phantom of hope, riding hard with a few ranch hands who had followed him. Alerted by the horse's agitation and the faint smoke of her cabin fire, the sight of him, determined and fearless, brought a rush of emotion to Mira she had never allowed herself to feel openly: relief, admiration, and something more tender, gratitude, mingled with the stirring of the heart. The confrontation was tense. Wolves circled, snarling and snapping. Emboldened by hunger, Caleb and the ranch hands shouted, brandishing torches, whips, and even barrels of flammable pitch to drive the pack back. Mira, standing at the doorway, watched as the man she had saved once became her protector. She realized that courage was not just her own. It could be shared, mirrored, and returned by those who cared even in the chaos. She noticed details: the way Caleb's eyes scanned the forest for the wolves' next move, the grit in his jaw as he shouted instructions to the ranch hands, the fierce determination that mirrored her own resolve during the first encounter. Seeing him risk himself for her safety ignited a recognition she could no longer deny. She was no longer alone in the world. She had someone who would fight for her, as she had fought for him when the wolves finally retreated. driven back into the forest by the combined effort. Mira felt a surge of something she hadn't felt in years. Belonging, the adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind warmth and relief, and she stepped closer to Caleb. "You came for me," she said softly. A hint of wonder in her voice. Caleb smiled, dismounting and taking her hands in his own. "I told you I wouldn't let anything happen to you," he said. "Steady and sincere, not after what you did for me that evening." As the forest settled into quiet again, Mira sat near the fire with Caleb. The danger had passed, but its effects lingered. She understood that her life was no longer just her own. She was connected now, irrevocably, to Caleb for the first time. She realized that opening her heart was not weakness. It was a choice, a conscious decision to accept love, trust, and family. Even if fear whispered that she didn't deserve it, Mira has seen firsthand that courage is not only about personal survival, but about mutual care. She has confronted her fears and recognized the truth. Caleb is not only a protector, he is someone who belongs in her life. Just as she belongs in his, the danger they face together has crystallized the bond between them, solidifying trust, gratitude, and an unspoken love that neither can ignore. The forest was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm has passed. Mira moved through her cabin with deliberate care, tidying the space, feeding the small animals she kept nearby, and checking the firewood supply, but her mind was restless, occupied by thoughts of Caleb and the events of the previous night. The wolf attack had left both their hearts racing, but it had also made one thing abundantly clear. They were no longer just two individuals, living separate lives. Their fates were intertwined, their lives bound by courage, trust, and something deeper, something neither dared to name aloud. Caleb arrived quietly, riding at a gentle pace toward her clearing. The first rays of dawn illuminated his face, revealing the fatigue from the previous night's battle with nature, yet also a soft, resolute expression that Mira had come to recognize as uniquely his. When he dismounted, he did not speak immediately, letting the quiet tension hang between them. Mira's heart pounded. She had grown accustomed to his presence, but the seriousness in his gaze made her stomach twist with both anticipation and fear. "You saved my life," Caleb began, his voice steady but layered with emotion. "And I can't thank you enough for that, not just for the wolves. For everything." He paused, taking a slow breath, as if choosing his words with care. "I can't imagine going on without you in my life. I don't want to go on without you." Mira felt her pulse quicken. She knew this moment would come eventually, but hearing it out loud made it real, urgent, and undeniable. Her instinct was to retreat, to protect the fragile rhythm of her solitary life. But her heart refused to yield to fear this time. Caleb continued, kneeling before her with an earnestness that left no room for doubt. "I'm not asking for repayment or for a promise out of obligation. I'm asking because I want you, I want a life with you, a home with you, and, Mira, if you'll let me, I want to marry you." Time seemed to stretch. The wind rustled through the pines. The sunlight filtered through branches like golden threads, and Mira felt the weight of years of loneliness and guarded living dissolve in an instant. She remembered the first moment they met in the forest, the night of his rescue, and the quiet nights that followed where trust slowly blossomed between them. She realized that she had never felt this kind of connection, this kind of belonging, with anyone before. Her lips trembled as she finally spoke, her voice a whisper, yet brimming with certainty. "Yes, I'll marry you." The simplicity of the words belied the magnitude of the choice she had made. She was leaving behind her life of solitude, embracing a future that was uncertain, vast, and intertwined with another person's heart. But she felt ready. She trusted Caleb. She believed in the bond they had nurtured through danger, laughter, and shared vulnerability. The forest seemed to sigh with them as Caleb rose and embraced her, holding her close in a quiet celebration of love and newfound family. For Mira, this was not just a proposal. It was an acknowledgment of her courage, her worth, and her ability to belong. She had saved a man from wolves. But in return, she had gained far more: a partner, a home, and a heart that matched her owning the following days. Their lives adjusted to this new reality. Mira helped Caleb with ranch duties, bringing her knowledge of the forest into practical use, and Caleb continued to nurture her growth and independence. Their partnership was not just romantic, it was a testament to trust, respect, and mutual reliance. Every shared glance, every small touch, reminded them that their love was forged through resilience, bravery, and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. The wolves were gone, but the lessons remained. Courage could be met with gratitude, solitude could be transformed into love, and even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to enduring kinship. Mira had saved a cowboy from wolves, but she had also saved herself from a life of loneliness, stepping into a future she never imagined but always hoped for.